And we're here with another episode of the Mr. Therapist and the Counselor podcast. Jesse, what are we talking about today, bro?
What are we talking about today? Today, I actually wanted to ask you this. Mr. Therapist, where did you come up with that?
Oh, okay. It's actually kind of clever. So, I go by Manny.
Clever? Ooh,
Romero.
I love clever. Give me some clever.
It's actually not that clever. Manny Romero.
Yeah.
I'm Manny Romero and MR Therapist. So, Mr. Therapist.
You're right. It wasn't that clever. I could have came up with that on my own.
Actually, it took me like 4 months to come up with it.
I believe that 100%. And then now you're going to ask me, where did I come up with the counselor?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, cool.
But I will.
On to the topic at hand.
Where did you come up with the counselor?
So, really, I mean, the fact that I'm a counselor, the only thing that I think of when I hear the counselor is
I feel like you came up with it when you thought about us doing something together.
Yes,
right?
I did. Okay. I was like, I need a moniker. I need a title. I was like, well, I am a counselor. Jesse O. My name is Jesse Otaka. Jesse O is like something that I've been called for a long time because I made people call me that. But the counselor, I always thought of this movie. It's called Cape Fear.
You just beat people up until they call you that. You can fucking call me Jesse O, man.
Drop the Taka part. Otaka. But no, the counselor comes from Robert De Niro, Bobby De Niro, from Cape Fear, and he was yelling at Nick Nolte, who was a lawyer at the time.
I haven't watched that movie. Yeah. You keep talking about it.
Yeah, it's okay, but like just that part in that movie, he goes, counselor, and I just thought that was like, I would love to use that on this, maybe actually I wouldn't want to use this on the podcast, because he's like a killer, but like, and we can never get copyrights. Anyways.
But you kill people emotionally, you're like, oh.
Yes, I say don't feel anything.
No.
Die with your emotions.
My bad. You kill people's demons and make them feel better.
Kill the demon. I'm a demon slayer. So I wanted to talk about the topic for today. I was thinking about this. I don't need therapy. How many people say they don't need a therapist? We kind of talked about it on an earlier podcast on the idea that I feel like, maybe you didn't say it like this, but I feel like everybody should have a therapist. I don't know how often people that I meet wish like they would have been taught this stuff growing up, if it's mental health or addiction, like in schools. How could they? And they are implementing it. Heard more like in college and other things. But
I wish therapy was a therapist was like a gym or like church.
Yeah.
You know, it's like go to church. Like if that's your thing, or go to the gym. You know what I mean? Like go the pizza place, right? Like go to a pizza. Like I wish therapy was seen that way, but there's a barrier. It's like
therapy can be like pizza.
There's you got a dad joke coming or something?
No, actually, I don't have it. I was gonna say, I think like when you eat pizza, right? They say there's never a bad pizza because it's still pizza, but you can have like not a good experience in therapy, and that's where maybe there's a resistance.
That was nice,
dude. That was a sweet.
You brought that
I didn't even plan that. That was hot, like right out the oven, like a pizza. But so why are people resistant to therapy? I can tell you like my piece. But for you, what do you think? Why are people resistant against?
I just think they don't know what goes on in the room, right? Like I think I talked about this earlier podcast, but like my experience, I don't think I ever really thought about what happens in a therapy room, but I know that I was scared to go into a therapy room. Yeah. Like what I was scared to show someone my inner self. Like I didn't even know my inner self, and so I was scared to like talk about the things I think about, to talk about the things I feel, to talk about like people I'm angry with, and like shit like that. Like I just feel like people are scared. It's like maybe judgment, right? It's like even though you're a therapist, like I'm gonna judge myself for the things I'm saying to you, maybe, or maybe I'm gonna believe that I'm a bad person because of the things I'm saying to you. And a lot of times, like, you know, when I have a new client come into therapy for the very first time, they'll apologize a lot. Like they'll say something like, I'm so sorry. Like, I know it's bad, but like, screw that guy, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't have to, like, I have to do a lot of that. Like, you don't have to apologize, you know? Like, and so that judgment piece could be a big thing too with that.
We really have, I heard this on a podcast before, and they talked about how culturally or society really has like, they have really opinions about our feelings. Like you can't get angry about this, or you can't get sad about that. And this is something we'll talk about eventually. But like I remember during the pandemic, like during that time, I remember getting angry about like little things when like the world's in like complete chaos. But I remember like being upset that I couldn't go see a summer movie. Like I was like, man, I was like, this is crap. Like I can't go to the movies. I want to go to, and I was like, this is so dumb. I shouldn't get angry or sad about this. But it was once again, and what I heard in this podcast was the idea of like, stay in your first generation, like your first whatever you're feeling, just roll with that. Like allow yourself to feel that. But you're right. I don't know how often people say like, I'm sorry, or like the idea I think we might have talked about is when people like start to cry. It's like I'm sorry that I'm crying. And I was like, whoa, like don't shut this down. Like that's a very powerful emotion. I know we talked about men and like showing that vulnerability and crying, but it's like a real shame-based presentation is to cry. So like I think you probably maybe you've heard this like therapy tactic. Like they've said like I've heard this from a therapist. Like if somebody starts crying, you're not supposed to hand them the Kleenex.
Yeah.
What is behind that? Just a little bit. Just want to hear like.
So what is that? So I think that is like letting a person learn how to self-soothe.
Right.
So
okay.
Handing the Kleenex, it's like you're telling them like. Right. Here, like wipe it down, or like like this is what you should be doing. But like some, it's like maybe you're interrupting their process.
Right?
Like maybe they need to cry more before they clean it up, right? And so
that was a side note. But like I know that like giving clients like I'll practice that sometimes. Like Jesse doesn't want anybody to like share Kleenex. I realize like it's a polite tactic.
Some people do care more about it than others.
Like, right, exactly. I like, I mean, I don't want to see your boogers all over the place. It's a
moment thing, you know what I mean? Sometimes you just gauge the moment. Like, I think I need to push the Kleenex on me.
Yeah, but back to what you're saying, though, the idea of, like, people being so apologetic of just being their true selves and genuine selves, and it's very challenging, very hard, and that's probably,
we got a lot of judgment on the inside. Like, I think we judge ourselves harder than the world, like, people judge us, and, like, that judgment seeps out. It's like, you feel sad, you feel angry, and then that voice inside of you, it's like you shouldn't feel this, like you said, or like like this is weak that you're crying. And sometimes you're not even conscious of that voice. You just feel that, right?
It's like a shame-based society though as well, and it's we are quick to judge and we're quick to shame people, and so like so that will keep people from like wanting to open up, and so for you, right, to like to go to therapy, that's maybe like an initial like.
I actually lied. So I'm thinking about, as we're talking about this, like I didn't lie, but like I had this memory that just came up. So I actually went to therapy in high school.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I was mandated to.
All right, so you didn't lie. You just didn't really remember that. It's okay. Yeah. There's a lot of self-reflection here. So like there are going to be things like.
This is what happens in therapy, by the way. Sometimes
I know you're so. I know I get it. Like I will. I want to practice honesty so much, and then like if I say something like that's not. That I'll just completely call myself out, but like no. But so you went to like
I did. I got in trouble in high school. Like we were messing around. We were like taking someone's phone. A friend of ours. She wasn't actually that good of a friend. Like we were just kind of teasing her. Someone took the phone and passed it around to all her friends, and I'm the one that had it last, and I got caught. And I was mandated to go to counseling for like 5 sessions or something. That was my very first experience with therapy. And now that I think of it, like. Because of that moment, like I associated getting in trouble with going to therapy.
There you go. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you think about like the bigger system, like right now you get caught doing something like doing drugs or selling or some sort of behavioral issue, like they could mandate you to go see a counselor.
Right. Anger management, like people go because your feelings. You don't
know how to manage.
Yeah, you don't know how to manage that emotion. You've got to learn how to reel it in. So you are being punished.
Yeah, because you're a menace to society. Exactly. I mean, not that severe, but like Yeah. So that's it. I don't know. Did you ever have a link like that, like with counseling, like when you were little? Like, did you ever have any beliefs around it that people spoke to you about? Or?
No, I mean, I really didn't have an understanding of what like counseling or therapy was until like much later in life. I might have I don't think I've talked about. So resistance to therapy, there wasn't really anything there. It was as soon as I knew about what it was and what it meant, like I just thought, wow, like that's really we need to talk to other people. And but there still can be a huge resistance on just opening up, and I know how often like clients there's just certain things they're not ready to share. And maybe something we'll talk about in a couple minutes here is the idea is like some people will share things in an individual session, which is like, you've done individual therapy. I do group therapy. I've done individual therapy. You've done group therapy, right. But there is like a difference. Clients will feel that way. Yeah. We'll talk about that like in a couple of minutes. I want to also to bring up before we get to that is like the difficulties with like therapy or counseling. Yeah. What difficulties is it in like, I guess, finding a counselor or therapist? And part of it, I bring this up because I've talked to clients and it's an overwhelming process sometimes to just find a therapist. And it's like, they want to find this perfect match sometimes. Sure. Yeah. And if they put all that effort into like finally sharing their story, it's like, it could be really like, I don't want to say maybe dissatisfying, or it'll leave people just like, I'm not going back to that. Yeah. It's interesting because I've worked with so many people that will say, I've gone to therapy, I don't like it. I'm like, well, why don't you like it? I had a bad therapy session and my therapist said this or whatever. And I'm just like, do you know how many times like addicts or alcoholics, like somebody will like try Jägermeister and they're like, right. Oh, I hated that the first time, but boy, I bet you came back to it a second time, put a little Red Bull in that bad boy.
Do it
like,
right, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So you're so willing to, sometimes we're so willing to do like the things that will hurt us, but we'll be resistant to the things that help us. So
there's layers to what you just said though. Like, so one layer I think about is people's expectation of therapy. Like if you're expecting to go see a therapist and to feel like fucking magical when you're out of there, you're probably going to like be let down. You know what I mean? Like, because the experience of talking about stuff and going to therapy, like it's a long process. Like, right. Like it's a practice, first of all, and it's building a relationship with a counselor. That's the second layer. It's like, do you have a relationship? Do you connect with this person? Does this person do you feel understood by this person? That's a second piece to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's like, and then the third thing is what you just said. Like, are you ready to talk about the stuff that you want to talk about? Because sometimes like you could have the best therapist in the world, but if you're sitting here like just not wanting to share something or sharing something too soon when you're not ready to talk about it, that can give you a bad experience just in opening up to someone. Yeah. So I feel like there's layers to it. You know what I mean?
There is, yeah. So I would say like also something that I wanted to talk about as well is that when you do have somebody in the room and you want to be inviting, but how do you challenge clients?
Like, so you're talking about like if a client is like, if I think a client is lying or if they don't want to share? Or
so here's the thing. Like we're talking about, so people can be resistant to therapy, right? So
define that though, like, cause I mean, resistant is such a therapy word, right? Like what does that mean for people who don't really understand or never been in a therapy room, aren't familiar with it?
Well, first off, I think once again, it's the idea of like, I think you said like taking that step back and saying like, I think my life's pretty good. Like I don't really need like help. I'm like, my life's not too bad.
Yeah. A little bit of denial.
Yeah, a little bit of denial. And that's where it comes into like, and even though our beliefs, I mean, I think we're similar in this fact that I feel like everybody could benefit somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
And that is what it is, a counselor or a therapist. So I guess you want
to like challenge something.
Yeah,
like that?
I guess for me, it is really inviting people in to feel safe. Like that's, I'll share a little bit about myself when it comes to this is like, I want the setting to be beneficial, of course, right?
Of course, yeah.
But I feel like often
you got to be careful, like with someone like who's not engineering.
Right? Yeah, it's really. I don't want to say it's easy for me. I work in a program. I work to where like people kind of get a sense of what I'm doing, right? So like they're like, hey, Jesse runs these type of groups. He's gonna be challenging. Can be confrontational. Yeah. There could be some conflict.
And when someone is in your group, they've committed to doing something.
Right.
They've committed to putting themselves in an uncomfortable position.
Yeah.
Like you're in there with a lot of people.
Right.
Right. And so you are in some level of acceptance because you're there.
Yeah.
But there could still be some denial that you're still dealing with.
Right.
So you'll challenge that.
You could challenge
people
that.
Expect that already from you.
Yeah. But if I didn't have that, I didn't have that net, and that's, I guess, where, like, I guess individual therapy can be really challenging.
It's a little different.
Yeah, because you're going to have somebody come in and there's no like example.
And the setting too is, I'm thinking about the setting because I've seen clients in treatment on an individual basis.
Yeah.
And I've seen them in private practice, which is what I do now. And so the setting is different. Like I can push or challenge someone a little bit more in treatment because they got to be there.
Yeah.
Right? Or because they've committed to being there.
Yeah, they signed up to it.
It's harder to leave. Yeah. It's harder for them to leave the treatment and never come back than it is for someone in private practice.
Right.
If I don't challenge them the right way, or if I push too hard, then they could literally just like end the session and never see them again. You know, so
that's gotta be
yeah.
I mean, how can you? That's gotta be so hard.
So for me, like
your tongue.
Yeah, I do. That's exactly what I have to do sometimes. Like I'll challenge a little bit. Like I have like I'll ask questions that are challenging. I won't ever be like, you're in denial, bro. Like, come on, your life's messed up. Take a look around you. Look at where you are. I won't do anything like that. But I'll ask a question. Like if someone's coming in to talk about, let's say, like they're in anger management, right? And so they have to come see a therapist for 5 sessions. They're like, I'm not angry. It's like, okay. I'm like, well, what leads people to believe that you are angry?
Right.
You know, like that's a challenging question because that makes you identify behaviors that people have problem with, right? Mm-hmm. But that'll be like, those are like, I challenge very gently that way, right? Especially if I'm building an early relationship with someone. If I have developed a good relationship with someone, if we've been seeing together for 6 months, a year, like, call them all their bullshit sometimes.
You're not co-signing bullshit.
That's kind of bullshit though, right, dude? Yeah. Like, but I won't ever get in their face. Like, I don't think that's just not my style as a person to be like.
Would you say because you've seen me, do you feel like my style is getting in people's
face? I feel like
face?
you're a little more aggressive.
Aggressive?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, I think man. but it's your style. Like, I feel like people I would expect that from you. Like, if I don't get that from you, I'd probably be a little disappointed. Like, Jesse, come on, man. What are you? Head in the clouds or something? Like, come on, like be in the room with me. But like, you know, I think you're a little more like confrontational about it. I don't know.
I like confrontational. Aggressive to me, I guess I always think like I want to be seen as assertive with an edge in comparison to like aggressive.
A better description is I'm more passive about it.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. So you're not aggressive. Yeah. But you're just more aggressive than I am.
See how aggressive I wasn't coming at you with that comment right there. I was scared. Like, no.
I was shaking. Yeah. But yeah, you are though, right? Yeah. Like how? Like, would you tell someone if someone was in denial? Would you tell them you think that? Would you be like, I think you're in denial?
I'd be like, I guess as much as I don't want to admit it, but like, I'd be like, you're full of shit.
Yeah.
Like
you'll say that to someone?
Yeah, I've said that to somebody though. So
do they take it well, or do they like?
No, not most times. Because my experience is like people that are full of shit don't want to hear they're full of shit. Yeah. The people that.
And anger is a defense mechanism. A lot of times, right? So.
And I think that I think most times, if people are willing, they're okay with that harder edge.
Yeah.
And then I guess that's even for me a lot of times if it's in a group session, I could tone it down a little bit because I could see that they want it a little bit. So real quick, I just want to share this. Like recently I had.
Well, let me say this though, because I think the cool thing though is that like if someone goes to session and is in denial, do you ever think about like, there's got to be a reason why this person still shows up?
Yeah, I do.
Like, do you play with that? Like, because that's the art of the therapy, right? It's almost like they're in denial, but they're also someone not in denial. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sitting in an hour group for this long, right? So, like, finding the nugget of that.
Yeah.
I just don't know if you had that. I had that experience. I don't know if for you it's the same.
It's not just like I'm not gonna just drop these bombs on people either, though. Like I recognize why potentially it's there. I think it's more the idea of when you invite certain ideas. I guess, and the way that I used it, the context, like if I'm just like you're in denial, like there would be a build up to that.
You gotta gauge.
I gotta gauge too, right? Yeah, and I also
if someone's super anxious and scared, you're not gonna be like.
Right. Yeah. Like, I guess, it depends on like their age. And there's been times in gender where I'm like, I got to take a little like more sensitive approach on somebody who's like had like severe trauma and maybe they open up something. I remember a client recently, like just so anxious and this person was pacing back and forth. And I was just like, okay, this person is highly anxious. Like, I want to make sure they feel safe and I invite them in. And in comparison, I was going to tell you is like recently I had somebody tell me like how, they felt like they were kind of hit rock bottom. Now I know rock bottom, it looks different for everybody, but basically they were trying to sell me on the idea of how desperate they were. And my response at the end of the process was like, you don't seem like a person that's that desperate, because I've seen people sitting in front of me. Now, you could take that for whatever you want, but and you could say like,
that's so touchy. I get anxious when I think about that. It's almost like you're comparing.
Yeah, you're right.
Their presentation to someone else.
Yeah, but I like being like this big character in a room.
I find your confrontational approach like attractive. Like I really like it. Like because sure you're wrong sometimes, but you're also like it's like a risk reward thing. It's like I could be wrong right now. You can think I'm full of shit. I could make you mad, but I also could like hit it right on the head. And I'm sure you've had those experiences where someone's like, "You're right, dude." Like maybe come after group, right, and be like, "Hey, dude, like you're right." Or even if someone got pissed at you, maybe a few weeks later they're like, "You were right when you said that. Thank you for saying that," or something like that, right? Like.
When you were saying that, I was like, oh yeah, I love when I'm right. But I've had people come back and say, I've had people like where I work, because I work in addiction, as I've talked about multiple times, but like, they'll be like, you're right. Both of the idea of like, yeah, you're right. I relapsed. You told me like you said something and you were right about that. I don't feel good about that. That's something I most definitely truly hope that I was wrong.
No, but you feel good about the growth, like
or the humility in the process of just saying, no, I thought I knew it all, or I thought this was bad for me, and I'm just like, I mean, I've had clients say like, suggest I would tell them that I was going to relapse. I don't remember that, but I've had people say like, yeah, you're going to relapse if, and I'm like, oh, and they're like, I did relapse. You were right about that, and I need to do something different. And that to me, like, is like I said, it's not the best thing to hear, because I'm just like, man, I don't want people to like, I don't know, put their failures on me. Maybe that's part of it as well. But
when you get controversial, or I keep saying confrontational, I have this like Sigmund Freudian slip, right? Like I do get uncomfortable with like confrontation. Freud? No, with confrontation. Okay. But like when you get confrontational, is that ever led by frustration? Like, does it come from a place of frustration sometimes?
Sure, sometimes.
I think that's what I get afraid of like coming up to someone and saying something because I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
Like there's this feeling in me that I'm like, I'm a therapist. I'm not supposed to get frustrated.
You shouldn't carry that over.
Yeah, exactly. I shouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah. My professional self needs to clean that up. There are times though, like emotionally, I could be emotionally driven.
Yeah.
And there are times where if I find myself really pursuing that, I do this thing where in my mind, through a process working with somebody, sometimes I'll just have to like, I'll say cut the cord. And I'm not trying to say I quit on the person, but I recognize like my tact isn't like the way it's going to work. Yeah. So I've got to try different ways, or maybe I just let them, maybe their experience will be different with somebody else and they'll grow, like what I'm doing isn't successful, I believe. So
this is also not very, like, you're a counselor, I'm a therapist, so we have different ways of going about things.
Yeah.
But would you say, like, that's the counselor approach and this is the therapist?
I think that...
Because I would say, like, there's probably counselors who are less confrontational than you are. Like, just be, like...
Yeah, probably.
Confrontation doesn't have to be the characteristic or the trait of a counselor.
No, it doesn't.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't just because I know people are going to watch this maybe who had never experienced a counselor or a therapist.
Right, and it's just like in therapy, people have different tacts.
Yeah.
I was going to ask.
There's therapists who are confrontational.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So that's why, like, it really, and I think that's important to know that for people that are somewhat resistant about finding that, like, look for what you need. People. It feels like if they find a therapist or counselor, they're like married to that. And listen, if you're in a program and you're assigned to like, I'm committing to this 30-day process, then yeah, it's a little different.
Yeah.
You're probably going to get a lot more personalities to work with it. But I think that's important also about if you go through like a program, and when I say program, like addiction, mental health program, you're going to get a sample of like different counselors and therapists. And hopefully like that's a good like introduction, like a training camp of like what it could be to work with a therapist and counselor. Like you look for like, I like this aspect of like Jesse, then I also like this aspect of Manny. So let me go out there and hopefully you have the motivation to do so.
I think it's good to, if you have a bad experience or if therapy's not helpful, I would give it like a good 3 to 5 sessions.
3 to 5. Okay, that's good to hear. Yeah,
like to decide, like, unless you for sure know someone said something, did something, you're just like, no. But I would give it 3 to 5 sessions.
That's good to know. Real good to know.
If you do have a bad experience, before you blame it on therapy, I would just say, you know what, the relationship wasn't there. Let me try someone new. Yeah. I had a therapist who I'm working with now, and like I love them, and they moved, so I'm doing telehealth with them. But before I continued telehealth with them, I looked for a different therapist.
Yeah,
and I tried it, and it kind of sucked. It wasn't because I had this expectation of what like this other person gave me. It kind of sucked, but I would still say like I still like. The work was still there for me to do. Like there was, it just the connection wasn't that well, that as solid as the first one. But there was, I mean, they were still a therapist. They were still giving me good information. It's just that the relationship wasn't there. And so like, even if you have like if you're somewhere like where there's one therapist around you, maybe in a rural area, like I feel like you could still do some good work. Like you just got to like not be so like put everything on the therapist to like fix you or to like.
And I think that might be another thing though, is that the idea of like you should know what you're doing because I'm completely inexperienced with that. So take me there and guide me there. But at least I've known from my understanding as a counselor is like I'm walking side by side with you.
Yeah.
So that's important to remember. Like I can show you the way, but the
client's work is more important than the 1 hour that you spend a week in therapy or counseling.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's so much more that happens outside the room. I do want to bring up like the difference between a group and an individual session. Where do you think where are groups more beneficial and where's individual sessions more beneficial? Or maybe where's the struggle sometimes for somebody that's like sitting in a group room? I brought this up, but I think often I've got this experience is like I'm only going to share this in a one-on-one setting. I've heard that before. And being a primary, I love groups. I personally prefer groups over individual therapy. I'll get defensive. I'm like, what? Like, you know what we're doing in here? I recognize like individual sessions, individual therapy, it's important to introduce an idea. But I think where the group grows, like what can help that idea is that fear and that shame of like, I'm only going to tell one person. Groups will help bring people into this like dynamic of like, look around, it's everywhere. So where do you think, where are the, like, I don't say pros and cons because they're both, there's tons of pros.
But if someone were to watch this and like, should I do a group? Should I do, like, how would they know?
Right.
I think individual therapy is easier to like get started with. It's almost like, you know what, if I haven't tried this before, like I'm going to give, like, it's one-on-one, it's more comfortable, like you're just, one person's listening to you. Where in a group setting early on, like it's nerve-wracking. It's like there's 5 to 10 people here, and they could all be thinking different things about you, and you can't control the confidentiality piece because everyone's listening. But I would say that like I think group has more. Well, that didn't finish up too well, did it? You know, it's the kinks and the dinks of technology. Obviously, this is a new podcast. It's a new thing. And so we're figuring it out, fellas. We're figuring it out. So I wanted to just add this last thing to the video just so you know where that was going, that last part of it. I know a lot of you are just dying to know what I was trying to say. All I was saying is that we were comparing groups and individual therapy. And all I was saying was that I think that group dynamics have this capacity that's higher maybe than individual therapy to change someone's life because just the dynamics of a group, a lot of people being there, supporting you, giving you feedback, it has this effect where people can really grow a little bit more impactfully. Change can happen a little more. It can be sustained a little bit more. You can learn more about yourself when you're talking in a group full of people versus just one-on-one with someone else. So I just wanted to share that with you. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you subscribe, and we're excited to get back on this to give you some more later on.